The mechanic's daughter left SEAL instructors speechless with just one trigger pull. Her hands, calloused from years in her father's garage, steadied the rifle with unexpected precision as seasoned military men watched in disbelief. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. For months, Maya Rourke had been a ghost at the Navy's elite Mojave Desert outpost. Her presence barely acknowledged as she moved through the supply yard with practiced efficiency. The scorching desert sun beat down on her oil-smudged cap as she methodically repaired equipment that kept the base operational. Humvees with damaged suspensions, weapon mounts needing calibration, and battered rifles with jammed mechanisms all passed through her capable hands. Yet the SEAL instructors, striding past, barely spared a glance for the woman they dismissively referred to as Wrench Girl. "Hand me that torque wrench," she'd say to the occasional recruit who wandered into her workspace, and they'd comply without really seeing her. Maya preferred it that way. Invisibility had become her armor, allowing her to observe everything while revealing nothing of herself. She'd grown up in the shadow of her father, Iron Jack Rourke, whose reputation as a mechanical genius had made him a legend among military mechanics. His innovations had saved countless lives, but his death 3 years ago remained shrouded in secrecy. The official story claimed a testing accident, but Maya had always sensed there was more to it. The daughter of Iron Jack carried his toolbox everywhere, a battered metal container that held more than just wrenches and screwdrivers. It contained his legacy. The mechanics bay became her sanctuary, a place where the young woman could lose herself in the familiar rhythm of repairs. She never sought the spotlight, preferring to fix things quietly, her movements economical and precise. When Commander Ellis Graves once asked about her background, she'd offered only the minimum. "Military family, sir. Just doing my job." What the commander didn't know was that Maya's mechanical intuition had been honed through years of off-grid survival with her father. Jack had taught her everything: how to rebuild an engine by moonlight, calculate wind resistance without instruments, and trust her instincts when technology failed. These weren't skills learned in any formal setting, but acquired through hands-on experience in remote locations where mistakes could be fatal. As she worked beneath a utility vehicle one Tuesday afternoon, she overheard 2 instructors discussing an upcoming sniper drill. Their voices carried clearly in the dry desert air, unaware of her presence. "The new scope prototypes are giving inconsistent readings," one said. "We'll have to recalibrate everything." Maya's hands paused momentarily on the wrench she was using. She recognized the problem immediately. It was something her father had solved years ago, but she remained silent, tightening bolts with practiced precision. Her time would come, but for now, she was content to remain invisible, gathering information while the desert kept her secrets. The scorching Mojave sun beat down mercilessly as the elite SEAL sniper team struggled with their long-range drill. Sweat dripped from beneath helmets and tempers flared across the firing line. What should have been a routine training exercise had devolved into a technical nightmare. "Just 2 clicks right," Commander Ellis Graves called out, frustration evident in his voice. The veteran instructor paced behind his men, watching as shot after shot missed the distant target. Maya Rourke leaned against a shipping crate in the shade, arms crossed over her oil-stained coveralls. She'd been repairing a Humvee nearby when the commotion drew her attention. The mechanic observed their increasingly desperate attempts with professional interest, noting how they fiddled with the scope settings between each failed shot. "Check the barrel harmonics," one recruit suggested. "It's the heat mirage," another argued. The bickering continued as Maya silently calculated the variables they were missing. Years of working alongside her father had taught her to read wind patterns across the desert floor. The way dust devils formed and dissipated told a story these trained soldiers weren't seeing. When she finally spoke, the words escaped before she could stop herself. "If you're just guessing windage like that, no wonder it's off." The firing line fell silent before erupting into laughter. Avery Holt, the team's top marksman, turned with a dismissive smirk. "Got yourself a shooting expert in grease monkey clothing, Commander." "Sorry, Wrench Girl," another recruit called out. "Didn't realize you were qualified in long-range ballistics." Maya should have walked away. This wasn't her fight or her place. But something in her, perhaps her father's stubborn pride, wouldn't let the moment pass. "May I?" she asked quietly, stepping forward. Commander Graves raised an eyebrow but gestured toward the rifle. "Be my guest." The weapon felt familiar in her hands, similar to models Jack Rourke had modified for years. Maya settled behind it, making 3 quick adjustments to the scope that had the instructors exchanging glances. She took no time finding her natural point of aim, didn't call for a spotter, didn't even request wind readings. Instead, she simply observed, calculated, and breathed. "The optics zeroed wrong," she murmured, "and you're reading the wrong wind layer." The silence around her was absolute as she squeezed the trigger with practiced precision. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, its report echoing across the desert range. 3 miles away, a steel target that had remained untouched all afternoon rang out with perfect clarity. The steel plate nearly 3 miles away rang out, the sound carrying clear and sharp across the desert expanse and echoing through the distant mountains. The metallic ping reverberated like a church bell in the silence of the Mojave, hanging in the air long after the bullet had found its mark. Every head turned toward the distant target, then back to Maya Rourke, the woman they barely acknowledged minutes before. Silence fell, heavy and absolute. As every instructor and recruit stared in disbelief, the SEALs exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from dismissal to confusion to grudging respect. One of them whispered something about beginner's luck, but the words died quickly as the spotting scope confirmed what seemed impossible: a perfect center hit at a distance that had stumped their best. Commander Ellis Graves, the lead instructor, lowered his binoculars and uttered a stunned question. "Who trained her?" His weathered face betrayed genuine shock, something the recruits had never witnessed from the stoic leader. The commander's fingers tightened around the optics, knuckles whitening as if he'd seen a ghost. With barely a pause, Maya answered flatly, "You calibrated your optic wrong, and you're compensating too early for crosswind." She handed the rifle back, the weight of it familiar in her grease-stained hands. The weapon felt like an extension of herself, a connection forged through years of her father's patient teaching in the garage behind their isolated home. The world she had skirted at the edges suddenly opened its gates. She was no longer invisible. Avery Holt, the base's top sniper, pushed through the crowd with narrowed eyes, studying her with newfound intensity. The competitive marksman seemed both threatened and intrigued by what he'd just witnessed. "That's Jack Rourke's daughter," Instructor Dev Singh said quietly from the back of the group. The revelation rippled through the assembled men like an electric current. Maya felt their eyes on her, measuring her against the ghost of her father's reputation. She replaced her cap, pulling it low over her eyes as she turned to walk away. Behind her, the buzz of conversation grew, questions multiplying. How had the mechanic's daughter learned to shoot like that? What else might she be capable of? The invisible woman had suddenly become the center of attention. Maya kept walking, her boots kicking up small clouds of desert dust. She hadn't meant to expose herself this way. The shot was instinct, muscle memory, mathematics, things her father had taught her during long nights of stargazing and ballistics discussions. Now that knowledge had changed everything, for better or worse. The echo of her shot still seemed to hang in the air, marking the moment her life at the outpost had irrevocably changed. Maya Rourke, Graves himself, sat ramrod straight, his weathered face revealing nothing as she entered. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair opposite his desk. "No pleasantries, no small talk. Walk me through that shot, every calculation, every adjustment." Maya hesitated, then methodically explained her process. The wind compensation, the humidity factors, the minute barrel adjustments she'd made instinctively. The commander listened intently, occasionally jotting notes, his eyes never leaving her face. "Who taught you this?" he finally asked. "My father," she answered simply. "Jack Rourke." Something flickered across Graves's expression. Recognition, perhaps even respect. "Iron Jack," he murmured. "I should have known." The silence that followed felt weighted with unspoken history. Then, unexpectedly, the commander leaned forward. "I'm not going to reprimand you for handling military equipment without authorization," he said. "Instead, I'm offering you a position." Maya blinked in surprise. "Sir?" "Not as a recruit," Graves clarified. "As a classified civilian contractor in our elite testing division. We're developing next-generation long-range weapons and optics. Your skills would be valuable." The proposition hung in the air between them. Maya's mind raced through the implications. This wasn't just about a job. This was access to the world her father had inhabited, the world that had ultimately claimed him. "Why me?" she asked cautiously. "There are plenty of qualified shooters here." Graves's mouth tightened. "What you did out there wasn't just shooting. It was intuitive engineering. You didn't just hit the target. You diagnosed equipment issues no one else caught." Maya stared at her grease-stained hands, remembering her father's identical calluses. The memories flooded back. Jack hunched over blueprints late at night, his hushed phone calls, the official men in dark suits who came to inform her of his accident during a routine test. "I'll need to think about it," she said. "Don't think too long," Graves replied, sliding a security badge across the desk. "This opportunity won't come twice." Maya picked up the badge, feeling its weight. This could be her chance to discover what really happened to her father, to protect his legacy from whatever had destroyed him. "I'll start tomorrow," she said quietly, making her decision. Maya Rourke's first week in the testing division felt like walking into a lion's den with raw meat strapped to her back. The mechanics bay, normally a sanctuary of tools and grease, had transformed into contested territory. Eyes followed her every move as she organized her workspace, the whispers barely concealed. "Daddy's little prodigy," one voice muttered when she passed. Another responded, "Wonder whose strings she pulled to get here." Maya kept her head down, focusing on the disassembled scope components before her, rather than the judgment radiating from every corner. Commander Ellis Graves had vouched for her skills, but his endorsement seemed to intensify the resentment. The other engineers watched her work with skeptical eyes, ready to pounce on any mistake. When she improved the trigger mechanism on a test rifle, reducing pull weight by 30%, her notes mysteriously disappeared from the shared database the next morning. The modification, however, appeared in the next prototype, without her name attached. The mechanics bay became increasingly hostile as June stretched into July. The Mojave heat turned the testing grounds into a shimmering hellscape, temperatures soaring well above 100 degrees. While others retreated to air-conditioned quarters during breaks, Maya remained, tinkering with her father's designs. Sweat dripping onto blueprints she carefully wiped clean. "You're in my spot," came a voice one afternoon as she calibrated a scope. Maya looked up to find Avery Holt standing over her, his imposing frame blocking the harsh sunlight. The elite sniper's reputation preceded him. 5 confirmed kills beyond 2 miles, instructor's credentials at 28, and an ego to match his accomplishments. "I didn't see your name on it," she replied, continuing her adjustments. The sniper's jaw tightened. "That's because real operators earn their place, not inherit it." He leaned closer, voice dropping. "Your shot might have impressed Graves, but out here, you're nothing but a distraction." That afternoon, Holt orchestrated a friendly competition during drills, pairing Maya against seasoned shooters in impossible scenarios. The recruits gathered to watch her fail, betting cigarettes and meal rations against her. Each time she stepped up to the firing line, the silence grew heavier, the pressure mounting. Dev Singh observed from the periphery, his quiet presence offering silent support. The instructor had known her father, though he never spoke of it directly. His eyes conveyed what words couldn't. This was just the beginning of her trial. By week's end, Maya understood the unspoken rules. She wasn't just fighting for recognition. She was battling for the right to exist in this world of warriors. Every improvement, every shot, every innovation would be challenged, stolen, or dismissed. The mechanic's daughter had entered the lion's den, and the predators were circling, waiting for her to show weakness. The fluorescent lights had long gone out across the base when Maya Rourke hunched over her workbench, the only illumination coming from a single desk lamp, casting long shadows across her father's blueprints. The battered toolbox sat open beside her, its contents meticulously organized despite years of use. She'd carried it everywhere since Jack's death, a physical connection to the man whose legacy now haunted her every move. Her fingers traced the faded lines of a scope design, stopping at a junction point where something felt wrong. The prototype scope, identical to those being shipped to combat teams overseas, showed a subtle flaw in the parallax adjustment that would cause increasing inaccuracy at extreme ranges. Not enough to notice in testing, but potentially fatal in the field. "This isn't right," she whispered, comparing the current schematics to her father's original drawings. The deviation was deliberate, not accidental. Someone had modified Iron Jack's design, compromising its integrity while maintaining its appearance. Maya glanced at her disassembled rifle laid out on the bench. Under the pale moonlight streaming through the high windows, she began rebuilding it with practiced precision. The hiss of a welding arc briefly illuminated the room as she modified a component, the sharp tang of hot metal and gun oil filling her nostrils. Familiar smells that reminded her of childhood days spent at her father's side. What she didn't notice was the shadow that paused outside the mechanic's bay door. Instructor Dev Singh stood motionless, watching her work with the same focused intensity he'd once observed in her father. The quiet man had recognized Jack's techniques in Maya's hands from the first day, but had kept his distance, uncertain of his place in this unfolding story. Singh had been one of Jack Rourke's students years ago, before the legendary mechanic's mysterious death. He'd learned to spot mechanical genius, and Maya possessed it in abundance. But what caught his attention tonight wasn't just her skill, it was her suspicion. She was seeing the same inconsistencies he had noticed months ago, but had been ordered to ignore. The instructor slipped away before Maya could detect his presence. Tomorrow would be soon enough to approach her. For now, he would let the mechanic's daughter work in peace, piecing together not just a weapon, but the first threads of a truth that powerful people wanted buried. Maya worked until dawn, fingers nimble despite exhaustion, driven by a growing certainty that her father's designs had been deliberately corrupted. And with each component she restored to its intended specification, she moved one step closer to understanding why Iron Jack Rourke had really died. The Mojave sun beat down mercilessly as Commander Ellis Graves assembled the entire training division. A challenge had been issued. Maya Rourke stood at one end of the firing line, her weathered cap pulled low against the glare, while Avery Holt, the base's top marksman, positioned himself at the other, his confidence radiating like heat waves off the desert floor. "High wind variable test," Graves announced, his voice carrying across the hushed range. 3 shots, 3 targets, increasing distance, no spotters. Maya felt all eyes on her. The conditions couldn't have been worse. Gusting crosswinds that changed direction every 30 seconds, heat mirages distorting the targets, and the added pressure of 24 skeptical SEALs watching her every move. When Holt fired his first round, the distant ping confirmed a clean hit. His second shot followed with equal precision. The sniper turned, a smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. "Your turn, Wrench Girl." Maya approached her position calmly. She knelt beside her rifle case and pulled out something unexpected. A small kit her father had assembled years ago. The instructors watched curiously as she modified her ammunition on the spot, carefully adjusting the bullet's seating depth and checking each round with a micrometer. "What's she doing?" one recruit whispered. Dev Singh, standing near Commander Graves, answered quietly. "Jack taught her that. Custom loads for unstable conditions." Maya loaded her rifle, a ritual performed with such precision it seemed almost meditative. She took position, inhaled deeply, and began her sequence. The first shot rang true, striking center mass. For her second attempt, she paused, feeling a shift in the wind. Without hesitation, she unloaded, switched to a different custom round, and re-engaged. Ping! Another hit. The final target stood nearly a mile away, almost invisible through the heat distortion. Maya closed her eyes momentarily, as if listening to a voice only she could hear. When she opened them, she made a minute adjustment to her scope, breathed out slowly, and squeezed the trigger. 3 seconds of silence followed. Then came the distant ring of steel. "Jesus Christ," someone muttered. Commander Graves lowered his binoculars, his expression unreadable. "That's Jack Rourke's daughter, all right." The whispers began immediately. How had she known to compensate for that specific wind pattern? Where had she learned to modify ammunition with such precision? And most disturbingly, if Jack Rourke had possessed such extraordinary knowledge, why had the military's official report claimed he died in a simple testing accident? Maya packed her gear methodically, ignoring the stares. She caught snippets of conversation, mentions of classified programs, black market weapons deals, and conspiracy theories surrounding her father's death. "They're afraid of you now," Elliot told her later, his voice low as they walked back to the mechanic's bay. "Not just because you can shoot, but because you might know things." Maya nodded. "Good. They should be." Whispers followed Maya through the corridors of the base. At first, they were barely audible. Hushed conversations that stopped when she approached. Sideways glances from personnel who had served alongside her father. But as her reputation grew, so did the rumors. "Iron Jack didn't die in a testing accident," a veteran mechanic muttered one evening as Maya calibrated scopes in the workshop. The man glanced nervously over his shoulder before continuing. "Word is he refused to sell some revolutionary targeting system to private contractors with black market connections. Next thing, equipment malfunction. Convenient, right?" Maya Rourke had always suspected there was more to her father's death than the sanitized report she'd received. The official story, catastrophic equipment failure during a routine test, had never matched the meticulous attention to safety that Jack had instilled in her since childhood. He triple-checked everything. Always, determined to uncover the truth, she requested access to her father's classified files through Commander Graves. The response came swiftly. Request denied. Security clearance insufficient. When she pressed further, a stern warning followed about the consequences of pursuing unauthorized information. "They're protecting something," she told Elliot one night while they worked late. The young engineer nodded silently, fingers nervously tapping against his tablet. "There was an engineer," he finally said, voice barely above a whisper. "Thomas Reeves. He worked with your father. After Jack died, Reeves testified in a closed-door hearing. 2 days later, he resigned and disappeared completely." Maya tracked down Reeves's former address only to find a family who had never heard his name. His digital footprint had been scrubbed clean. Social media, professional profiles, even his military service record redacted to bare essentials. It was as if Thomas Reeves had never existed beyond the most basic documentation. Late one night, Dev Singh found her in the supply yard, surrounded by stacks of maintenance logs. "You won't find answers there," the instructor said quietly. "They're very thorough about what they erase." Maya looked up, eyes red from strain. "Then where?" Singh hesitated before answering. "The question isn't where to look, it's who to trust." He glanced meaningfully at the security cameras before walking away. That night, Maya realized she was truly alone in her search. Every path led to locked doors. Every inquiry met with silence or deflection. The truth about her father was buried beneath layers of classification, secrecy, and possibly something far more sinister. She stared at the rifle in her hands, her father's design, improved by her own modifications. Whatever had gotten Jack killed was worth hiding, which meant it was worth finding. Maya would have to become a ghost herself to chase her father's shadows. The deafening crack of Maya Rourke's rifle turned into a metallic screech as the weapon misfired spectacularly. The recoil sent her stumbling backward, a searing pain shooting through her shoulder. Smoke billowed from the barrel as instructors rushed forward, their faces masks of concern and suspicion. "Everyone clear the range," Commander Graves bellowed, his authoritative voice cutting through the chaos. Maya clutched her throbbing arm, embarrassment burning hotter than the pain. This was the third day of qualification tests, her chance to prove herself worthy of the program. Now she stood disgraced, her weapon a smoking failure before the entire division. Hours later, alone in the mechanics bay, she methodically disassembled the rifle. Her trained fingers traced each component until she found it. A hairline fracture in the firing pin housing that couldn't possibly have formed naturally. Someone had deliberately weakened the metal, creating a failure point that would activate only under the stress of rapid fire. This wasn't an accident, she whispered to herself, cold realization settling in her stomach. A shadow fell across her workbench. "I suspected as much," said Instructor Singh, his usually stoic expression tinged with concern. The quiet man leaned closer, examining the damaged part. "Your father would have spotted it too." Maya glanced around nervously. "You knew him well?" "Well enough to know Jack wouldn't have died testing faulty equipment," Singh replied, his voice barely audible. "He was too thorough." The instructor's eyes met hers with unmistakable meaning. "Not everyone here is pleased with your progress, Maya. Some feel threatened by what you represent." She thought of Avery Holt's cold stares, of whispered conversations that stopped when she entered rooms, of the strange timing of equipment failures that only affected her trials. "Why tell me this?" she asked. Singh straightened, resuming his professional demeanor. "Your father saved my career once. I couldn't save him." He placed a small toolkit on her bench, one she recognized from her father's collection. "Watch your back. This isn't just about shooting anymore." As he walked away, Maya realized the true stakes. Every improvement she made, every test she passed, threatened someone's agenda. The sabotage wasn't just about humiliating her. It was a warning. That night, she reinforced her living quarters lock and slept with a wrench beneath her pillow. For the first time since arriving at the base, Maya understood she wasn't just fighting to honor her father's memory or prove her own worth. She was fighting for her safety in a game where the rules and players remain hidden in shadow. The desert night fell quickly as Maya Rourke retreated to the supply yard, his sanctuary of metal and tools. 3 days had passed since the sabotage incident, and the whispers followed her everywhere. Instead of cowering, she spread her father's worn blueprints across a workbench illuminated by a single overhead lamp. "They think they can scare me off," she muttered, tracing her finger along the faded lines of an unfinished design. Jack had been working on a revolutionary stabilizer before his death, one that compensated for microtremors in the shooter's hands. Maya studied the calculations, making adjustments where her father's work had been interrupted forever. For 5 nights straight, she worked in solitude. The only sounds were the distant coyotes and the occasional patrol vehicle passing by. She machined parts with precision, adapting materials from the base's inventory. The stabilizer took shape, sleeker than her father's original design, but unmistakably built on his foundation. When she finally attached it to her rifle, the balance felt perfect. The device used a gyroscopic system that dampened natural body movements without compromising the shooter's control. Maya tested it first in private, making minute adjustments until she was satisfied. The next competition arrived with perfect timing. Commander Graves had organized a precision shooting drill with crosswinds deliberately introduced by industrial fans. The other shooters struggled with the unpredictable conditions, their frustration evident as shots went wide. When Maya's turn came, Avery Holt stood nearby with arms crossed, clearly expecting failure. She ignored him, settling into position with her modified rifle. The stabilizer worked flawlessly, allowing her to maintain perfect stillness despite the gusting wind. Her first shot struck dead center, followed by 4 more in tight grouping. Impossible in these conditions. One instructor whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. Commander Graves examined her rifle afterward, his experienced eyes immediately noticing the modification. "Your work?" he asked simply. "My father's design, my execution," Maya answered, pride evident in her voice. Within days, she noticed engineers examining her rifle when she wasn't around. By the following week, a similar stabilizer appeared on Avery's weapon, slightly different in appearance, but clearly based on her innovation. "They're stealing your work," Elliot told her during a rare moment alone in the mess hall. "Just like they did with your father's." Maya watched as her creation was absorbed into the program without acknowledgement. That night, she returned to the supply yard and opened a hidden compartment in her toolbox, revealing more of Jack's designs, innovations he had kept secret from the military. "This is just the beginning," she whispered, running her fingers over the blueprints. To protect her father's legacy, she would need to aim higher than mere competition victories. The fight for truth would require strategy, allies, and courage, all qualities a mechanic's daughter had in abundance. Maya's fingers traced the worn edges of the rifle component, her eyes narrowing as she caught an unusual reflection from within. Under the harsh fluorescent lights of the mechanic's bay, she tilted the battered firing pin housing, revealing what appeared to be deliberate markings inside. Not scratches from use, but precise etchings. "What the hell?" she whispered, reaching for her precision light. The beam illuminated a series of numbers, followed by coordinates, a date exactly 3 years prior, and a single word that made her breath catch: hollow fire. Maya Rourke recognized the handwriting immediately. The way the 7s curved slightly at their base, her father's distinctive style. Jack had left this message knowing someday she might find it. A cold certainty settled in her chest. This wasn't random. This was deliberate, a breadcrumb leading somewhere important. The next morning, she sought out Elliot, the base's young tech engineer, whose brilliance with systems was matched only by his discomfort with people. She found him hunched over a terminal, fingers flying across keys, his lanky frame tensed as though expecting criticism. "I need your help," Maya said, sliding the component across his desk. "And it needs to stay between us." Elliot adjusted his glasses, eyes darting nervously to the door before examining the markings. "This is military-grade encryption formatting. The coordinates are masked within a standard calibration sequence." His voice grew steadier as he focused on the technical challenge rather than the social interaction. Over the next week, they worked during off hours, Elliot gradually decoding Jack's encrypted logs while Maya pieced together fragments of information. The young engineer grew more animated with each breakthrough, his anxiety receding when engaged with Maya on their shared mission. "Your father was brilliant," he said one night, after cracking a particularly difficult section. "He built redundancies within redundancies. The system thinks it's reading maintenance data, but it's actually transmitting entirely different information." Maya smiled, noticing how Elliot now maintained eye contact when they spoke, something impossible when they'd first met. He always said the best place to hide something was where people already expected to look. As the pieces came together, a troubling picture emerged. Hollow Fire wasn't just a project, it was a warning. Iron Jack Rourke had discovered something that had gotten him killed. "We're close," Elliot said, his usual stammer gone as determination replaced fear. "Whatever your father found, he made sure you'd be the one to uncover it." Maya nodded, feeling the weight of her father's trust. For the first time since arriving at the base, she wasn't just chasing a ghost. She was following a path deliberately left for her, hidden in plain sight all along. Maya Rourke sat cross-legged on her bunk, surrounded by ballistics charts and trajectory calculations. Something had been nagging at her for weeks, a familiarity in the shooting techniques Commander Graves had praised. It wasn't just good marksmanship, it was something distinctive. "You don't shoot like any recruit I've ever seen," Graves had told her. "Your breathing pattern, your trigger discipline, it's almost like..." He'd stopped himself, but Maya now understood what he'd meant. Leafing through a classified document Elliot had helped her access, she found her answer: the Phantom Line. This elite sniper division operated beyond conventional military structure, their methods shrouded in secrecy. Their signature technique, the controlled half-exhale before firing, was exactly what she'd been doing her entire life. "My father taught me that," she whispered to herself, tracing the document's outline with her fingertip. The realization hit her like a desert thunderstorm. Jack Rourke hadn't just repaired their weapons. He'd absorbed their techniques, modified them, and passed them to his daughter during those long afternoons in the garage. Dev Singh confirmed her suspicions the next morning. "Your father was their lifeline," he explained, voice low as they walked between Humvees. "When Phantom Line operators came back with damaged equipment, the military sent them to Iron Jack. He could fix things no one else understood." Maya nodded, pieces falling into place. "And he watched them, learned from them." "He did more than watch," Singh replied. "He improved their methods." That evening, Maya emptied her rucksack, searching through the small keepsakes she'd brought from home. At the bottom, wrapped in oilcloth, lay a small wooden box containing 6 hand-loaded bullets, her father's special prototypes. She held one up to the light, examining its distinctive brass casing and custom weight distribution. The realization struck her instantly. The bullet she'd used for that first impossible shot, the one that had changed everything, wasn't standard issue. It was one of Jack's creations, accidentally mixed with her regular ammunition. "You've been guiding me all along," she whispered, rolling the bullet between her fingers. The next day, Maya approached Commander Graves with her discovery. His face remained impassive, but his eyes betrayed recognition. "Phantom Line was decommissioned 3 years ago," he said carefully. "Your father's contributions remain classified." "But not forgotten," Maya replied. "His influence is everywhere here, in the rifles, in the techniques, in me." Graves nodded slowly. "Jack Rourke's fingerprints are on half the systems we use. The question is, why would someone want to erase that legacy?" Maya pocketed her father's bullet. "That's exactly what I intend to find out." Every revelation pointed to the same conclusion. Her father's influence ran deeper than anyone had acknowledged, or perhaps than someone wanted known. Maya Rourke had begun to notice the sideways glances whenever she made adjustments to her rifle. At first, she dismissed them as typical curiosity, but the pattern became unmistakable. Someone was watching her work, and not just casually. Private Tyler Jenkins, a recruit who had been particularly vocal in his mockery of Wrench Girl, always seemed to linger just within earshot. The young soldier would pretend to clean his weapon or check his gear, but his phone was often angled suspiciously in her direction. Maya caught glimpses of the device quickly disappearing into pockets whenever she looked up. "You're getting paranoid," Elliot told her one evening as they worked on decoding another batch of encrypted logs. The tech engineer's fingers flew across the keyboard, his usual social anxiety temporarily forgotten in the focus of their work. "Am I, though?" she countered, lowering her voice. "3 times this week I've made adjustments to the stabilizer, and 3 times someone's tried the same modification during drills." What Maya didn't know was that Jenkins had already compiled over 40 minutes of high-definition footage. Close-ups of her custom modifications, her unique loading technique, even her handwritten calculations. These videos were being transmitted to Arcturus Defense Systems, a private contractor desperate to reverse engineer her innovations before the military could patent them. Her reputation at the outpost had evolved from novelty to legitimate threat. Commander Graves had begun inviting her to briefings, usually reserved for senior personnel. Even Avery Holt, while still maintaining his distance, had stopped openly challenging her abilities. "They're tracking your progress," Dev Singh warned during a rare private moment at the supply yard. The instructor's voice was barely audible over the desert wind. "Be careful what you reveal, especially around the new faces." That night, Maya lay awake in her quarters, staring at the ceiling. The battered toolbox containing her father's blueprints was tucked securely beneath her bed. She'd taken to sleeping with her most critical notes hidden inside her pillowcase. Trust had become a luxury she couldn't afford. Every improvement she made to her equipment now came with calculated misdirection, deliberate mistakes that would render copied designs ineffective. She began working on her most sensitive projects only in the dead of night, when the outpost was at its quietest. The walls had eyes, the ranges had ears, and Maya's innovations had become the most valuable currency in a shadow market she never asked to enter. As she drifted toward uneasy sleep, one thought circled in her mind. In a place designed to train America's most elite warriors, she had become both target and weapon. The desert sunset painted the outpost in amber as Maya Rourke sat across from Commander Ellis Graves in his sparse office. The commander's weathered face betrayed more than military discipline. There was guilt etched into those lines. "I knew your father," Graves finally admitted, breaking the silence between them. "Not just as a mechanic. Jack was a friend." He pulled out a worn service record, sliding it across the desk. "I was reprimanded 15 years ago for defending him when accusations started flying. Said he was withholding designs, being uncooperative." The commander's voice hardened. "I knew it was garbage then. Iron Jack never compromised on safety or ethics." Maya studied the document, her fingers tracing her father's signature. She'd spent years believing her father died in a testing accident, but the official narrative had always felt hollow. "They buried the truth along with him," Graves continued. "I couldn't stop it then. But with you here," he paused, meeting her eyes directly, "I have a chance to make things right." The revelation settled between them like a physical weight. Maya understood now why the commander had championed her from the beginning. She wasn't just a talented shooter, she was his path to redemption. Later that night in the solitude of her quarters, Maya disassembled her custom rifle for maintenance. The familiar ritual calmed her racing thoughts. When she connected the diagnostic tool to her scope, something unexpected happened. Her father's voice emerged from the device's small speaker. "Calibration sequence 19, the recording began. Her hands froze. Jack Rourke's voice continued. "If you're hearing this, you found my breadcrumbs, kiddo." Heart pounding, Maya realized her father had embedded messages within the equipment he'd left behind. The scope wasn't just a precision instrument. It was a vessel for his final communications. Each night after that, she discovered more encoded logs during maintenance mode. Some contained technical specifications, others personal messages, but all pointed towards something called hollow fire. "The third ridge, eastern slope, 30 degrees, one message instructed. "Look for the pattern in the firing sequence," advised another. Elliot helped her decode the more complex encryptions, the young engineer's eyes widening as patterns emerged. "Your dad was brilliant," he whispered. "This isn't random. He built a map." Dev Singh noticed her late-night work, but asked no questions, simply standing guard outside the mechanic's bay when she needed privacy. The puzzle pieces were aligning, but Maya couldn't shake the feeling that time was running short. Someone else was tracking her progress, and the shadow of her father's fate loomed larger with each revelation. Whatever hollow fire was, it had cost Jack Rourke's life, and now It threatened his daughters as well. The desert air hung heavy with tension as Maya Rourke stared at the computer screen, her fingers frozen above the keyboard. Lines of code scrolled past, revealing a truth more devastating than she'd imagined. The AI sniper system, the crown jewel of the Outpost's research division, wasn't just similar to her father's work. It was built on it. "They've been tracking every simulation I've run," she whispered. "Every calculation, every adjustment, it's all here." The predictive trajectory algorithms that made the system so deadly accurate were modeled directly from data harvested from years of her running Jack simulations. Her own shooting style, her instincts, her father's legacy, all stolen without consent. Behind her, Dev Singh closed the door to the secure terminal room. The instructor's normally stoic face showed rare emotion. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice barely audible over the hum of cooling fans. "2 weeks ago, I received orders to sabotage your rifle before the qualification round." Maya turned, her expression hardening. "From who?" "The same people pushing this AI system forward." Dev's eyes never left hers. "I refused. Now they're watching me too." The revelation hit her like a physical blow. The misfires, the equipment failures, they weren't accidents or hazing. They were systematic attempts to push her out before she discovered the truth. "That's why they call it hollow fire," she realized. "It's empty, no human behind the trigger, just an algorithm. My algorithm." A soft knock interrupted them. Elliot slipped inside, his lanky frame tense with nervous energy. The young engineer clutched a tablet displaying security clearance logs. "I found something," he said. Newfound confidence, steadying his typically anxious voice. "Someone's been accessing your father's archived files for 3 years, long before you arrived." The three stood in silence, the gravity of their situation settling around them. They were up against not just individuals, but an entire system designed to erase human judgment from warfare's most critical decisions. "They need me to complete it," Maya said finally. "The system can't replicate my father's final adjustments, the ones he kept in his head." Dev nodded slowly. "Which makes you either their most valuable asset or their biggest threat," Elliot finished. Maya ran her hand across her father's old toolbox, feeling the worn metal beneath her fingers. An uneasy alliance was forming. The quiet instructor who had known her father, the brilliant engineer finding his courage, and herself, the mechanic's daughter who had become so much more. "Then we expose it all," she said, her voice steady with resolve. "Every last bit of it." The coordinates led Maya Rourke to an unmarked bunker, nestled deep within the restricted zone of the base. Using her father's security codes that should have been deactivated years ago, she slipped inside under cover of darkness. The air was stale, tinged with the metallic scent of electronics and gun oil. Inside, rows of servers hummed beneath harsh fluorescent lights. Maya's fingers traced across dusty keyboards, bringing dormant screens to life. What she found made her blood run cold. Hollow Fire wasn't a mission designation as she'd assumed. It was the code name for an autonomous weapons program. "This can't be right," she whispered, scrolling through file after file. The system was designed to replace human snipers entirely, using predictive algorithms that looked eerily familiar. Her father's signature was everywhere in the code, the same mathematical patterns she'd grown up watching him sketch late into the night. The truth hit her like a physical blow. Jack hadn't died in a testing accident. He'd discovered the true purpose of his work and refused to complete it. The ballistic calculations she'd been perfecting all these months weren't meant to improve human marksmanship. They were the missing piece in an autonomous killing machine. On a secured terminal, Maya found footage of early Hollow Fire tests. The system could identify and eliminate targets without human authorization, operating in any weather condition, day or night. Most disturbing were the notes about plausible deniability and untraceable operations. This wasn't about battlefield efficiency. It was about assassination without accountability. "Dad knew," she murmured, finding a corrupted video file where Jack's voice came through in fragments. Cannot allow. Ethical boundaries. Not what I designed this for. Maya sank into a chair, the weight of understanding crushing down on her shoulders. The shooting competitions, the constant surveillance of her techniques, even the sabotage, it all made terrible sense now. They needed her to solve the final calibration problems her father had deliberately left unsolved. A noise at the door startled her. She quickly downloaded the evidence to a secure drive and slipped it into her boot. As she exited through a maintenance tunnel, Maya's mind raced with implications. The system needed one crucial element to become operational: her own shooting algorithms, the intuitive adjustments she made that no computer could replicate. She emerged into the cold desert night, stars sharp overhead. For the first time since arriving at the base, Maya knew exactly what she was fighting for. This wasn't just about clearing her father's name anymore. It was about preventing his greatest fear from becoming reality. The Mojave's winter brought bitter cold that seeped through even the thickest clothing. Maya Rourke pulled her cap lower as she trudged through the base, watching her breath form clouds in the frigid air. The past weeks had become a war of attrition. Each modification she made to the prototype scope disappeared overnight, reappearing in official designs without acknowledgement. "They're watching everything you do," Elliot whispered during their late-night decoding session. The young engineer had grown bolder in their alliance, but fear still shadowed his eyes whenever security personnel passed. Dev Singh found Maya in the mechanic's bay, his normally stoic expression troubled. "Commander Graves is under pressure. They're threatening to court-martial anyone helping you access restricted files." She nodded, hands never stopping as she reassembled a firing mechanism. "And you? Ready to abandon ship?" "Your father wouldn't have," he replied simply. The tactical trial scheduled for that afternoon had drawn unusual attention. Maya noticed extra cameras installed around the training yard, ostensibly for performance evaluation. When Avery Holt approached with his team, his smile held no warmth. "Wrench Girl gets to play soldier today," he announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Try not to embarrass yourself." The simulation was brutal, a hostage extraction in near-whiteout conditions. Maya moved through the course with mechanical precision until she reached the final scenario. The hostage mannequin had been modified, its features crudely altered to resemble Jack Rourke. She froze, rifle halfway to her shoulder. "What's wrong, Rourke?" Holt called from behind cover. "Can't pull the trigger when it matters?" The world contracted to a pinpoint. Maya's hands trembled, not from cold, but from a surge of grief so powerful it stole her breath. Years of compartmentalized emotion crashed through her carefully constructed walls. Later, in the empty mechanic's bay, she sat with her back against the cold concrete, tears streaming silently down her face. Singh found her there, offering not comfort, but presence. "I just wanted to know he was right," she finally whispered. "That he didn't die for nothing." The instructor knelt beside her. Jack refused to compromise his principles, even when it cost him everything. "And now they want me to give them what he wouldn't." She wiped her face with an oil-stained sleeve. "I can't." "Then don't," Singh said, "but understand what you're up against." Maya looked at the disassembled rifle parts spread before her. In that moment, she made her decision. If they wanted her father's legacy, they would have to face the full truth of it, and her. "I understand exactly what I'm up against," she said, rising to her feet. "And they have no idea what's coming." Snow dusted the Mojave training yard as Maya Rourke adjusted her position behind the rifle. The demonstration had drawn military officials, defense contractors, and even a senator, all gathered to witness what they believed was a showcase of next-generation sniper technology. What they didn't know was that this was the culmination of Hollowfire, the program built on her father's stolen designs. Maya's stomach nodded as she watched Commander Graves brief the visitors. The decorated SEAL instructor had no idea he was being used as a front for something far more sinister. Across the yard, Avery Holt led his team through final preparations, his usual swagger now a performance for the cameras that stream the event to secure military channels. 2 minutes to demonstration, came the announcement over the comms. She caught Dev Singh's eye from his position near the control station. The instructor gave an almost imperceptible nod, their signal that something was wrong. The AI system was being activated without the safety protocols they had discussed. "They're bypassing the human override," Elliot whispered urgently through her earpiece. The young engineer had hacked into the system's backend, his social anxiety forgotten in the urgency of the moment. "Maya, they're using your ballistic calculations to prime the autonomous targeting." Her father's voice seemed to echo in her mind from the encrypted logs. "A weapon without conscience is just a tool for murder." Jack Rourke had died protecting this principle, and now his daughter stood at the same crossroads. With practiced efficiency, Maya slid her custom stabilizer into place and accessed the maintenance panel on her scope. Her grease-stained fingers, once dismissed by these same officials, now moved with surgical precision as she connected Elliot's bypass module. 30 seconds, the announcement continued. The mechanic's daughter took a deep breath. Years of living in her father's shadow, months of being wrench girl, weeks of uncovering the conspiracy, all had led to this moment. She had to choose between the legacy they wanted to build on her skills and the one her father had truly left her. "I'm in," she whispered to Elliot, rerouting the signal now. As the demonstration began, Maya lined up her impossible shot, not at the human targets downrange, but at the central processor of the AI system itself, exposed for maintenance during the demonstration. With a single pull of the trigger, she sent a specialized round, one of her father's prototypes, directly into the heart of Hollowfire. The bullet carried not just kinetic energy, but Elliot's coded signal, broadcasting the system's true purpose to every screen in the facility and beyond. In that frozen moment, as officials shouted and security scrambled, Maya Rourke was no longer invisible. The shot echoed across the Mojave as Maya Rourke's bullet struck not flesh and blood, but the central processing unit of the Hollowfire system. Screens throughout the demonstration area flickered, then displayed lines of code, the very algorithms that had been stolen from her father's work. Maya had done more than disable the AI. She had broadcast its entire operational framework, complete with classified mission parameters and unauthorized targeting protocols. "What you're seeing," she announced through the comm system, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins, "is proof that Hollowfire was designed to eliminate accountability in military operations." Within 24 hours, the footage went viral. By the end of the week, 3 congressional committees had launched investigations. Commander Ellis Graves stood beside Maya during her testimony, his military career effectively over, but his conscience finally clear. "My father died protecting what he believed in," she told the packed Senate chamber. "That weapons should serve soldiers, not replace their judgment." The young engineer Elliot, once too anxious to speak in group settings, presented the technical evidence with newfound confidence. His detailed breakdown of how the system had been programmed to operate outside Geneva Convention parameters left the committee members visibly disturbed. Dev Singh's testimony proved equally damning. The quiet instructor revealed years of pressure to compromise safety protocols in favor of automation, painting a picture of institutional corruption that reached the highest levels of military procurement. In the aftermath, defense contractors circled Maya like vultures. They offered 7-figure salaries, private labs, unlimited resources, all to harness her inherited genius and proven skill. "You could name your price," one executive told her during a meeting at a luxury hotel overlooking the desert. "Your father would have wanted you to succeed." Maya studied the man's expensive watch and practiced smile. "You didn't know him," she replied simply, rising to leave. 3 months later, she used her settlement money to launch Project Rourke in a converted warehouse outside Phoenix. The open source initiative brought together veterans, engineers, and ethics specialists to develop technologies that enhanced human capability without removing human judgment. Avery Holt, to everyone's surprise, was among the first to join. The former rival had been humbled by the scandal, his elite status tarnished by association with HoloFire. "I enlisted to protect people," he told Maya on his first day. "Somewhere along the way, I forgot that." The mechanic's daughter nodded, understanding the weight of legacy better than most. She handed him a wrench, not a rifle, and together they began building something that couldn't be weaponized against the innocent. Spring returned to the Mojave, bringing with it a ceremony unlike any the base had seen. The entire SEAL training division gathered at the newly renovated sniper range, where Commander Ellis Graves unveiled a modest bronze plaque. Maya Rourke stood quietly at the edge of the crowd, her hands clean of grease for once, though she couldn't help fidgeting with a small wrench in her pocket, a habit she'd never break. "In recognition of excellence beyond measure," Graves announced, his voice carrying across the silent yard, "the Jack and Maya Rourke Precision Range." The crowd's applause felt surreal to Maya. 6 months earlier, she'd been invisible, just the woman who fixed their equipment. Now instructors nodded respectfully as she passed. Even Avery Holt, who had once been her fiercest critic, offered a grudging handshake. "You earned it," he said simply before walking away. Dev Singh approached her after the ceremony, his usually stoic expression softened by something like pride. "Your father would have approved," the instructor said, gesturing toward the plaque's inscription. "You don't need permission to be precise." Maya traced the words with her fingertips. It was his favorite saying. Later that evening, she sat with Elliot on the hood of her truck, watching the sunset paint the desert in gold. The young engineer had flourished in recent months, his social anxiety giving way to quiet confidence as they built Project Rourke together. 3 more universities signed on today, he told her, scrolling through his tablet. They want the open-source training program for their engineering departments. Maya nodded, her gaze fixed on the distant mountains. The Senate hearings had concluded 2 weeks ago, with the HoloFire program permanently dismantled. Her testimony had ensured no one would weaponize her father's work again. She had declined every military contract offered, despite the substantial sums attached. Instead, she'd chosen to teach, to share what Jack Rourke had given her with a new generation of mechanics and engineers who understood that precision wasn't just about hitting targets. "I never wanted to be a soldier," she told Elliot, watching as the first stars appeared. "I just wanted to fix things." He smiled. "You fixed more than anyone expected." The next morning, Maya packed her father's toolbox into her truck. She left behind copies of his blueprints, safely archived where they belonged, but kept his worn leather gloves. The mechanic's daughter had built something her father would have recognized. Not a weapon, but a legacy of conscience. As she drove away from the base, the rising sun caught the bronze plaque, making it shine like a signal fire across the desert. Some legends are born in battle. Others are built by hand, one precise adjustment at a time.